Imagine this. You wake up one morning, scroll through the news, and it feels like the world has gone mad. People arguing about everything. Truth feels slippery, like it's made of smoke. What used to be called good now seems mocked, and what once was evil is being celebrated. Families are divided, churches are confused, and deep down, something feels wrong. Now picture this. An old man sitting by candlelight in 1942, writing words that would echo 80 years into our future. He wasn't a prophet, but a thinker, a man who saw through time because he understood the soul of man. His name was C.S. Lewis. And what if I told you that C.S. Lewis warned us, warned the church, warned America about exactly what we're seeing right now in 2025? That he saw a collapse coming, not because of politics or money, but because of something much deeper. Before we dive into what Lewis foresaw, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon, because what we're about to uncover could reshape how you see your faith, your nation, and your purpose in these confusing times. Now, let me tell you a story. There was once a young man, let's call him Daniel. Daniel loved Jesus, but lately he felt tired, not physically, but spiritually. Every time he spoke about his faith at work, someone rolled their eyes. Every time he tried to stand up for what was right, he was told, "That's outdated." He started to wonder, is following Christ even worth it anymore? One night, he sat alone on his couch, scrolling through social media. He saw chaos, anger, mockery. And in that moment, something inside him whispered, "This world doesn't even want God anymore." And he believed that whisper. He believed it until, one night, he stumbled upon a quote by C.S. Lewis that struck him like lightning. When the whole world is running toward a cliff, he who is running in the opposite direction appears to have lost his mind. That one line woke something up in Daniel's heart. Because that's what 2025
feels like, doesn't it? A world sprinting toward the edge, toward moral collapse, while those who hold on to truth are called crazy. But here's the twist. C.S. Lewis wasn't talking about politics or governments collapsing. He was talking about something much deeper, the collapse of truth itself. Lewis saw it coming. In his writings, like The Abolition of Man, he warned that when a society rejects objective truth and calls everything relative, when people start saying what's true for you isn't true for me, the very foundation of civilization begins to crack. He said, we make men without chests and expect from them virtue and enterprise. In other words, we strip away the moral compass, teach generations that there's no right or wrong, and then wonder why they can't stand for anything. Sound familiar? Think about our schools, our media, even our entertainment. What messages are being planted every day? Follow your heart. Live your truth. There's no such thing as sin, just self-expression. It sounds empowering until you realize it leads to emptiness. Because if my truth can never be wrong, then there's no need for grace, no need for forgiveness, no need for God. And that is what C.S. Lewis called the quiet collapse of man. But let's pause for a moment, because this isn't just about America, it's about you and me. Jesus once said in Matthew 7:24, "Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The storm came, the winds blew, but the house didn't fall. Why? Because it was built on truth." What Lewis saw was a world trading that rock for sand. He saw people saying, "We'll build our own foundation, our own morals, our own meaning." But when the storm of confusion hits, as it is hitting us right now, everything built on lies begins to crumble. Lewis once described hell not as a fiery pit, but as a place where people are locked inside their own pride forever, each one convinced they're right, yet utterly alone. Isn't that what our society feels like? Millions of isolated truths, but no unity, no direction, no anchor. And yet, God still whispers through the noise. Maybe you've felt that whisper lately, like Daniel did. That ache that says, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Maybe that's not despair. Maybe that's the Holy Spirit calling you back to rebuild your house on the rock. If you've ever looked around and thought, why does everything feel so lost? Write this in the comments. Lord, rebuild my heart on your truth. Let's fill the comments with that prayer. Because C.S. Lewis's warning wasn't meant to scare us, it was meant to wake us up. He knew that when truth collapses, everything else falls with it. But he also believed something else, something we'll uncover next. Because Lewis didn't just warn about collapse, he revealed the way back to hope. C.S. Lewis once said, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. Those words are like a quiet voice in the chaos of 2025. Because even though he warned about collapse, he never ended his message in despair. He believed that hope was not only possible, but inevitable for those who returned to the truth. Let's go back to Daniel. After that night when he read Lewis's quote, something inside him changed. He began to see the world differently. The noise on social media, the endless arguments, the darkness that once scared him, suddenly it wasn't as loud. Because Daniel realized something powerful. The collapse Lewis spoke of wasn't just out there, it was also in here. The decay begins inside hearts that forget who they belong to. That realization led Daniel to his knees. He opened his Bible and landed on John 18:37, where Jesus said, "For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth." And Pilate responded, "What is truth?" That question, spoken 2,000 years ago, still today. What is truth? Every generation wrestles with it, but in 2025, it feels like the world has stopped asking sincerely. People don't want truth anymore. They want comfort. They want validation. They want to feel right, not be right. And that's exactly what C.S. Lewis warned about in the Screwtape Letters. He wrote of a subtle evil, a demonic whisper that doesn't say there is no God, but rather there's no need to think about him. A world distracted into destruction. That's the danger of our age. Not persecution, not open rebellion, but distraction. Endless scrolling, constant noise, hearts lulled to sleep by comfort. But here's where the story twists again, because God, even in the middle of collapse, always plants seeds of revival. When Daniel realized how far his own heart had drifted, he didn't despair. He began small. He prayed each morning, "Lord, open my eyes to what's real." He shut off the noise for a while, no news, no endless debates, and spent that time reading the words of Jesus. And something miraculous happened. Peace began to return. Not because the world got better, but because Daniel's eyes began to see differently. You see, collapse doesn't begin with governments. It begins with hearts. But so does renewal. C.S. Lewis believed this deeply. He said, "We are not merely imperfect creatures who must be improved. We are rebels who must lay down our arms." That's powerful, isn't it? Because it reminds us that the battle for truth isn't fought in Congress or Hollywood. It's fought in you, in every thought you choose to believe, in every word you speak when no one's watching, in every act of love that defies hate. Jesus warned us about this spiritual collapse long before Lewis did. In Matthew 24:12, he said, "Because lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold." Think about that. When truth collapses, love collapses with it. Because love, real love, is built on truth. And that's the heart of Lewis's warning about 2025.
He wasn't predicting the end of America. He was warning about the end of conviction, a world where people stop believing that truth even exists. But he also gave us the antidote: return to the source. In Mere Christianity, Lewis wrote, God designed the human machine to run on himself. He himself is the fuel our spirits were designed to burn. That's the answer. You can't fix a nation if the soul of its people is empty. The healing of America doesn't start in the White House. It starts in your house. So what if, just imagine, millions of Daniels across the country began rebuilding on that rock again? What if Christians stopped blending in and started standing out? Not with anger, not with judgment, but with love that refuses to bend to lies. The collapse wouldn't win. The darkness wouldn't get the last word. Because every time someone chooses truth over comfort, heaven rejoices. Every time someone forgives instead of retaliates, the kingdom advances. Every time a believer says, Lord, use me, the tide shifts a little more. That's the vision Lewis carried. That's the hope he left us. But there's something even more personal, something he wrote just before he died, almost like a message for generations to come. In one of his final letters, he said, "Courage, dear heart." He knew faith would grow harder. He knew truth would be mocked. He knew believers in the future, you and I, would feel outnumbered. But he also knew that courage wasn't found in numbers. It's found in knowing who walks beside you. Maybe right now you feel like Daniel, overwhelmed by the world, wondering if your small faith can make a difference. But remember what Jesus said in Matthew 5:14. You are the light of the world. Not governments, not movements, you. And light doesn't need permission to shine, it just needs to stay lit. If that truth speaks to your heart right now, write this in the comments. Courage, dear heart. Let's make that our declaration. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to stand anyway. Lewis once wrote that hardship often prepares an ordinary person for an extraordinary destiny. Maybe that's you. Maybe you were born for this moment, to be light in a collapsing world. But there's one final warning and one final hope that ties everything together. The part most people overlook. The part that reveals why Lewis's words weren't just insightful, they were prophetic. Because before the collapse comes a calling. C.S. Lewis believed that before every collapse, God sends a calling, a final invitation, not to terrify, but to awaken. And if we listen carefully, we can hear that same call echoing across 2025. Daniel began to hear it too. One night he was reading through The Great Divorce, where Lewis paints a picture of souls who choose heaven or hell not as destinations forced upon them, but as outcomes of what they truly desire. Some souls choose heaven because they desire truth more than pride. Others choose hell because they cling to their illusions, even when they destroy them. Daniel read one line that changed him forever. There are only two kinds of people in the end: those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says, in the end, "Thy will be done." And he realized that's the real warning, not about America's economy or politics or wars, but about souls. About what happens when a generation says to God, "We don't need you." C.S. Lewis saw that long before it began. He predicted a time when technology would advance, but wisdom would vanish. When we'd have endless knowledge, yet lack understanding. When we'd build towers of progress, but our foundations would crumble. Look around. We have more access to information than any generation before us, but less discernment than ever. We know how to live longer, but not why to live at all. We've made everything convenient, except the truth. That's the collapse Lewis warned of. A collapse not of civilization, but of meaning. But
Here's the breathtaking thing about God. He never lets collapse have the final word. In Luke 15, Jesus told the story of the prodigal son, a young man who walked away from his father, chasing pleasure, freedom, and self-rule. He thought he was progressing, but he was really collapsing. He lost everything. But in the moment he hit the ground, something beautiful happened. He remembered his father's house. That's the picture of our time. The world has run off chasing its own truth. But God is still standing at the gate, waiting for his children to remember home. Lewis understood that. He said, God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. It is his megaphone to rouse a deaf world. Maybe the chaos of 2025 isn't proof that God has abandoned us, but that he's calling louder than ever. The collapse is not the end. It's the alarm. Daniel began to see that. The same world that once scared him became his mission field. Instead of running from the darkness, he started shining into it. One conversation, one act of kindness, one prayer at a time. And little by little, his faith became contagious. People at his workplace noticed the difference. They asked, "How do you stay so peaceful when everything feels uncertain?" And Daniel would smile and say, "Because I know who holds tomorrow." That's what Lewis meant by hope. Not naive optimism, but a fierce, grounded belief that the story ends in victory, because the author already wrote the final chapter. In Revelation 21:5, Jesus says, "Behold, I am making all things new." Not some things, all things. That's the destiny of the faithful. That's the promise for those who refuse to bow to false truths. C.S. Lewis warned that civilizations fall when truth is abandoned. But he also taught that revival begins when even one heart turns back. That's the power of one believer fully surrendered to Christ. You might think you're too small to make a difference, but so did Daniel, so did Moses, so did David. Yet God uses ordinary people to rewrite history. So maybe the reason you're hearing this today isn't coincidence. Maybe God is whispering, "Stand firm. Don't give up. The world may be collapsing, but my kingdom is not." Because no matter what 2025 looks like, truth doesn't tremble. Love doesn't fail. The cross still stands. Lewis's message to America wasn't prepare for destruction, but prepare your hearts. Because nations rise and fall, but souls last forever. And maybe that's the warning we needed most. The collapse isn't the curse. The curse is forgetting the truth that can still save us. So today, if you feel that pull in your heart, if you sense that God is calling you back to something real, something eternal, don't ignore it. Do what Daniel did. Lay down your pride, your fear, your distractions, and whisper, "Thy will be done." Because that single prayer has the power to rebuild what the world has broken. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "If you look for truth, you may find comfort in the end. If you look for comfort, you will find neither comfort nor truth." That's the challenge he left for us. Will we seek truth, even when it's hard? Will we build on the rock again? If your heart says yes, write it in the comments right now. Thy will be done. Let's fill this space with surrender, with courage, with faith that refuses to collapse. Because the truth is this: the darker the world gets, the brighter the light of Christ will shine through you. And maybe that's why God allowed you to live in this time. Not to fear the collapse, but to lead the rebuilding. C.S. Lewis's warning about 2025 wasn't a prediction of doom. It was a reminder of destiny, a call for believers to rise, to love, to rebuild, to shine. So take heart. The storm may rage, the world may shake, but if your life is built on the Word, you will not fall. Because the truth isn't an idea, it's a person, and His name is Jesus Christ. So stand firm, dear heart. The world is trembling, but
Heaven is still at work.